So I don't even need to do an introduction because everyone is so happily introducing themselves. But good evening, I'm Maria. I'm your events host for the evening. Welcome to RJ Julia Madison. We are happy to have you with us, and we're thrilled to have author Tom Straw with us as well. Up like that. Now I feel like I should do something. So, Tom, is it okay if I still call you that again? You should write comedy. Maybe that will happen. You may be the best known unknown writer, albeit one with 7 novels on the New York Times bestseller list. Like many of his books, that's a mystery. It's easily solved once you know that Tom wrote under an alias Richard Castle. I must admit, I didn't get the whole connection, but Richard Castle is a fiction, he's a character on a television show called Castle. And he is also a writer, and the smartest writer ever, who sort of embeds himself with the New York Police Department and starts solving mysteries, because everyone knows that's so easy. You could train for 20 years to be a detective, but an author just jumps right in there and starts solving all the mysteries. And in his spare time, he romances a lot of women. I don't know if this is autobiographical.
Not at all. Never, not even once.
Well, all the mysteries that he solves, all of these criminal whodunit type of cases. So he's a pretty popular and pretty busy person. So as his alter ego Castle, Tom wrote the aforementioned best-selling Nikki Heat novels, of which there are 7,
Yes.
including New York Times #1 bestseller Heat Rises. The novels tied in so perfectly to the TV series that viewers came to believe that Castle really was writing the books. So there was an interesting anecdote. I don't know if it was on your website or another website that I read, that Tom went to purchase one of the novels or talk to someone about one of the novels, and they did not believe that he wrote the novels and were looking for Richard Castle, who reportedly wrote the novels. Tom's written for TV comedies, including Night Court, Days World, Grace Under Fire, and Nurse Jackie. Also wrote for CBS's Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. He's an Emmy and Writers Guild of American nominated writer-producer. Former Mystery Writers of America board member. He also published another popular whodunit, Buzz Killer, under his own name. Tom is here tonight to discuss his latest book, The Accidental Joe, with John Valenti. And I almost kept calling you Joe. I said, that'd be interesting.
It would be John Valeri.
John Valenti is a lifelong lover of books and book writers. He has contributed book reviews, author interviews, and feature profiles to many publications, including Crime Reads and the National Book Review. Recently, he launched an online show, Central Booking, where he interviews authors and other industry insiders. And this you'll be able to watch too, because we are recording it this evening. So you won't see it on your show, but you'll be able to watch it on our channel. The Accidental Joe promises to deliver another high stakes adventure. So everybody get ready, and let's give Tom a warm welcome. In spare time. So take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's nice to be here. And, I was thinking you're a book reviewer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because I was thinking maybe
Allegedly.
you could probably use a bookmark.
I will never. Oh, now I'm gonna have to rewrite.
Maybe you bookmark.
Right.
John and I have actually known each other for some time.
Introduce us to Nathan.
So you take it away.
Yeah, no, we've
I'll
known
just
each other
say
for
hi.
a while.
Thank you for coming, I should say, very much.
I enjoy seeing you leap out of your chair every time somebody says Tom. So I'm debating, do I want to frame every question with Tom just to see if I can figure it? Meanwhile, I will not move, for the next half an hour. I think that inadvertently at CrimeCon many years ago, I almost semi-outed you is Richard Castle
right.
before the world knew.
That's right.
That you were Richard Castle, so I've decided I'm not gonna ask if Tom Straw is your real name. Because after reading this book, I kind of suspect that, maybe there's even more than meets the eye going on here, but probably best left to the imagination.
Let's just leave
I'm
it
gonna
at that.
say.
Yeah.
We won't discuss that. But anyway, before we talk about the book, I figured just in case anybody needs extra incentive to purchase a copy for yourself, or, all your family members, friends, mailman, the little free libraries. Something that I found heartening to read is that your publisher is making a donation to World Central Kitchen. And I'm just wondering if you could speak briefly to that charity and why you chose that organization.
Absolutely, Ken. I'm happy to do that. Regalo Press, by the way, regalo is Spanish for gift. My publisher, who was my Castle editor, Gretchen Young, when she started the imprint, one of the things that she wanted to do, aside from gathering a stable of really fine writers, was to have a charitable aspect to each book that gets published. So part of the deal was that she asks each author to select a charity to give a donation to upon publication of the book. And I have been aware of Jose Andres for years. I had also, when I was on the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, he was a regular demonstration guest, a cooking display and all that sort of stuff. And I was always taken with his style and with his cooking and all that. But the important work he's been doing with World Central Kitchen, why he doesn't have a Nobel Peace Prize, I don't know. But I guess what I do want to say is this was decided a year ago before the events in Gaza about a month or so ago. But even more poignant now, I think. But he does fine work. It also struck me as kind of a no-brainer as a tie-in to a book that was about a chef. So there you have it.
There you go. Well, let me ask you about your chef.
I will say one other thing.
Please.
If you go to my website, tomstraw.com, there's a drop down for charity, and there is a button you can click there if you want to make a donation yourself to WCK.
Sure. So actually, my next question, in the introduction, it was said that, Castle was the smartest writer of his time. So if you were Castle, I think that means you might be the smartest writer of our time. That's not really a question, I guess.
Yeah,
But
I guess it is, but I like it.
just the idea.
My long-suffering wife is here, Jennifer, and when the first book, Heat Wave, came out, we were having lunch in Boston on Newbury Street, I think Joe's American or something like that. And we were having lunch, and seated at a table behind us, there was a couple, and the guy was trying to explain to his wife, and it was very funny to hear because it was a lot like the introduction we had here. Well, you see, he's an actor in the show, but the character doesn't really write the books. It's written by somebody who says he's Richard Castle. And it was one of those moments that I said to Jennifer, I said, I'd love to turn around in the chair right now and say, perhaps I can be of help.
Yeah, we're such a litigious society.
Yeah,
The smartest
yeah.
writer in America could not do that, under threat of lawsuit.
There was an agreement. It was a tacit agreement. It was not contractual, as I found out, thank goodness. That I could claim to be Richard Castle, but I just never did it because it would be like outing Santa Claus. It's like you don't want to spoil that, and we kind of all agreed, without having it be in writing, that we get a lot of promotional juice out of the question of who actually wrote the book. So that's that.
There you go. All right, I suppose we should probably talk about the accidental Jill for a bit. So let me ask you about your celebrity chef, globetrotting Sebastian Pike, who has this great show with the best title ever, Hangry Nation. Like, who wouldn't want to watch that show? But my understanding is sort of the loose inspiration was Anthony Bourdain. So I'm wondering if you can talk about the spark of the idea, and then how the character kind of showed himself to you as something more original.
That's
than
great.
that.
Thank God. You don't know where you get your ideas. Sometimes you get really terrible ideas, and you start writing it, and this isn't going anywhere. But I was running one day, and I've always been a Bourdain fan. I watched all of his shows, Parts Unknown, No Reservations, The Layover. We even went to see his one-man show at Foxwoods one time. I never met him, but I admired him greatly. And by the way, he was a great writer. I've never read his fiction, but his nonfiction was and is terrific. So he was kind of living in my head a little bit. I was running one morning and just one of those light bulb moments of like, what if he were using that show to spy for the CIA? Because it lets him get access to places that maybe they can't. And so, okay, that's one line. I had to kind of develop that. And I also didn't want to rip off Bourdain. I wanted to have this character be of my own creation. So I stole it from somebody else. No, just, there are a number of other chefs I know. I've also followed a lot of careers of other chefs, done a lot of reading of their biographies and memoirs, and then just my own imagination of, okay, who would this guy be? What would he be like? Why would he be such a contrarian? He's a guy who doesn't give a rat's ass, and that's kind of a neat character to put in a book. And then the thought came to me, okay, so if he's working for the CIA, that kind of guy wouldn't go to spy school. He wouldn't go to Virginia and go to the farm and do all the training and all that stuff. So it occurred to me that, well, then what I've got to do is have him paired with somebody who is a professional spy, who is basically manipulating him to do various things. And when he finds out about it accidentally, that's where the title comes from. He's the accidental Joe. He didn't realize that his producer was a CIA agent. And he found out in a very good way. And so then it's off.
So how convenient, a producer manipulating people to do things. So I have to ask you too, so there is this spark of attraction, between Sebastian and Cami, and they both have, sort of heartbroken, haunted pasts, which in one way sort of attracts them to each other, but also, knowing that this woman that you're attracted to is a CIA handler, that sort of opens the door to all kind of inherent complications with any potential relationship. So can you talk about, their back and forth, will I, won't I, and how you sort of weave romantic intrigue into a mystery novel without having it overtake the narrative?
This is why he's the perfect guy to read.
This is why I read books, right?
Yeah, you're hitting all the right points. Backing up just a little bit, I do like writing romantic comedy. I like writing romantic drama. And so I knew I wanted to have a relationship, much as in the Castle books and in the Castle series, I wanted to have a relationship moving forward through all that. And the way I wanted to complicate it wasn't just with spycraft, because that can be kind of like inside baseball stuff. I wanted to construct a dynamic in their relationship that wasn't about, will they go to bed? How is it going to affect the mission and so forth? I wanted to make it a little more universal, which is the conflict many professional people have in their lives, regardless of what field they're in, when you have geographic differences, where you have career differences that may separate you from each other at a certain point. The looming question of this book isn't will they sleep together, because they do. It's what happens when the mission is over. Is she going to move on to do other CIA work? She's certainly not going to quit her CIA career to book guests for him and to arrange transportation in Italy to go to a cookout. So that becomes the real push-pull of the relationship, and I think is a theme that I think puts them on a collision course and a denial course. There's a lot of kicking the can down the road, but it does inform the whole ball of wax.
Sure, and I heard that you have an extract that you might like to read.
Oh.
That seems like it might be an opportune time for that.
I just happen to have it here. This is on paper instead of the book because I edited it for time, and also I took out the fuck words. I guess I didn't. Actually, I chose this for two reasons. First of all, there are no hard words in it, but it also helps us meet our characters, Chef Sebastian Pike and Cami Nova. And I want to give you just a little setup for this. It's not a long passage, but his producer, the producer who had been on his show for 3 seasons, just went into rehab. So in the middle of the season, he's in a position where he has to hurry to find a producer. So he flies to New York to do a day of speed dating interviews with a bunch of candidates, and they're all gathered there at the network offices. He has no clue. This is a spoiler that the reader won't know, but I'm telling you because I think it'll make it more fun to hear this, some of the innuendo. But he has no clue that his very first candidate is a spy for the CIA with a secret motive to get the job. So here we are at her job interview. Cameron Nova was first up when I dropped into the network's conference room for a binge day of interviewing producer candidates, and she opened big. She said, "I won't be shy. This is my dream job. I've seen every episode of Hangry Globe twice. I've not only studied your show, I've studied you. I'm as big a fan as a person can be without getting hit with a restraining order." Funny, he said, and with bite. She hitched the thumb to the glass wall at the other candidates waiting out in the waiting area. "I'd send them home now." Then she regarded the open duffel bag on the table. My clothes, a tangle of clean, dirty, and passable, spilled out like roadkill innards, topped by the electric shaver I hadn't had a chance to use in 3 days. "You know, a producer would get you a hotel." "I'm only in New York a few hours. Tonight I'm off to Vientiane, then Paris," she said. That cannot be a lucky guess. "One of my old assistants books travel for your network. I like to be informed." "What have you heard about me?" "I'm here." I rocked back in my chair. "Well, I can be prickly. Headstrong depends on how you define it, or if I slept. I don't suffer fools or bullies, and I hate to be lied to. But I never fire inside my own perimeter. If you're family, I'll take a bullet for you." I paused to appraise her reaction. "I'm still here." What I need from a producer is an eye for substance. That's the sweet spot of this show. I cook and I goof around, but I always balance it with a big dose of getting real. She said, "Like in Portugal, you surprised Emeril Lagasse by taking him to his grandfather's ancestral home and made him cry." "Exactly. Food is my gateway. Last season at Wembley Stadium, she cut in. Backstage with Adele. You cooked her red quinoa pilaf, then you coached her to say F off to the tabloids." That's the part I left out. She really said fuck. It's in the book. You have to buy the book if you want to see that word. Intrigued, I decided to test her rapid fire. Afghanistan, season 1. Nangarhar province, you surprised a unit from Texas with home cooking, specifically burnt ends and beans. Rio, season 2. Ipanema gigolos. South of France. You made brunch for Bono and the Edge at their villa in Ez. When you told Bono Pride in the Name of Love was the most powerful musical tribute ever to Dr. King, he sang it and you teared up. I think it was more than just the song that moved you. You know more about me than I do. Count on it. Was she too good to be true? I'd find out after the other interviews. Very impressive, Kemi. I'll be making a decision soon. We rose to shake, but when I sat down, so did she. What do you call this, deja interview? This time she gave me no smile. You're slipping. Excuse me? It's subtle, but I see it, even if nobody else does, or will tell you. Am I hallucinating from jet lag, or are you critiquing me in a job interview? Nova stayed on point. You're having a rough time. I didn't say anything. I listened with a small knot cinching under my ribs. You know what you always were? You were the guy who came on TV and my breath caught. You had that look at me, something exciting is about to happen mojo, until something happened. We all know what it was. Hell, the world knew. The sensational death of my fiance. The shock I still bear. She leaned in. I'm talking about how it affected you and how it feels now on your show. It's like you're doing Pike instead of being Pike. I'm rarely speechless, but this candidate, this stranger, left me holding my breath and leaning into what she would say next. She said, I can produce your show, but I can also help you find that charismatic contrarian again. Cameron Nova folded her hands on the conference table. That's all I got. I swiveled to look at the other candidates through the glass, then back to her. Is your passport current?
So we should tell these fine people, some of you may have heard, but Tom is actually going to be narrating the audiobook. So he already did he tested for the publisher, but now he's tested for the public. So what do you think? To hear all those hard words.
I wish I didn't have all, like I wrote, there's Russian, there's Norwegian, there's Hungarian
Oh my God.
and French. I'm good with the French.
Little bit of English too.
The other stuff, I'm gonna have to go to Mr. Google.
Yes, you've just given yourself a very difficult job. So I wanted to ask you, you mentioned a couple times, even in that extract, that Sebastian is known to be very contrarian. But throughout the book, we get to see different sides to his personality. And I think part of that is because you write in the first person, but you also give us, sort of transcripts of the voiceover that he does for his show. And I will say, I shot myself in the foot. You were offering me money and I said I was going to go revise my review. And then you called it Hangry Globe, which realized I referred to the show wrong, not only here, but in my review. My deep apologies for that.
Quite all right.
So now I have homework when I get home. But we have, the transcripts of those voiceovers, which reveals a bit of his character and his personality. But then too, he sort of breaks the fourth wall at times and he'll actually speak directly to dear reader. So I'm wondering, if you can talk about your approach to making that connection with readers through your different stylistic choices.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to self-disclose a little bit here to do that, and I'm happy to. That's why we're here, isn't it? We're all friends. The first first iteration of this book, I wrote in the third person, omniscient. And it was a good book. It didn't go anywhere. And so I thought, you don't get many ideas like this very often. And so instead of writing another book and moving on and, putting it in the trunk or what have you, I sat with it for a while and I thought, the best reaction I got from the original book was people loved the voice of this guy in the voiceovers. Where he's very snarky about places he goes or, very revealing of certain things that are going on, sparing no expense in stepping on people or making fun of people, what have you. And so I thought to myself, why don't I write the whole book in that tone with that voice? And I took it a step further, rather than just changing all the U's to I's. I decided to go for a convention that's centuries old, but I did direct address to the reader. So it wasn't just in first person, but there are moments in the book where he says, can you believe this is going on? Reader, I'm not gonna lie to you. In other words, I have him purposely, and I feel successfully engaged one-on-one with the reader, because I think that to me makes reading a relationship. And again, it's back to what do we like about reading? I mean, there's all sorts of styles. But for me in this book, what I wanted was to go beyond just the simple contact with the reader that an author has, but to actually make it a relationship. We've heard about unreliable narrators. I wanted to make him the most reliable narrator. So.
Well, also in the interest of self-disclosure, I'll say I started talking back.
I heard you.
I'm scary. This is the voice you do not need in your head. So I wanted to ask you too. I don't know how people feel about different subgenres of mysteries, because there are so many. And I think sometimes, you hear spy thriller or espionage story, and maybe that sounds like it's not necessarily appealing to a certain type of reader. I'll even say it's never something that I sought out, but in recent years, a lot of my trusted authors have started to sort of branch into that lane. I mean, you've done it, and this book is top tier. Tess Gerritsen's done it, Robert Dugoni, and I feel like in the right trusted hands, you will read and enjoy anything. So I'm wondering, one, if you can tell us a little bit about, the spy tradition that comes through in this book. But then also what I think you do beautifully is meld a lot of your own personal interests. And so people who are familiar with you are going to relate, to the television aspect, to the foodie aspect, to the travel aspect, all things that you are personally passionate about. So can you talk about melding tradition with originality?
Yeah, and I'll begin by taking a slight step back. Even though I've written all these comedy shows and stuff like that, since I was a kid, I was into James Bond. I loved I Spy. In fact, I described this book to my agent as it's I Spy with food instead of tennis. It's that kind of show. So there's a lightness to it. But along the way with my interest in spy and detective books, I was more of a fan of John le Carré and Graham Greene than a lot of the hard-bitten action, taught dramas, which are all great and people do them very well. But I wanted to bring a sort of, like I describe it as in music, it would be like I wanted to do a spy novel in a major key instead of a minor one. And so that informed bringing the romance into it. People laugh out loud reading it because there is comedy in there, but it doesn't fight the tension. It probably informs and helps and like that. But Jennifer and I are foodies. We cook all the time. We've had the fun of going to Europe and taking cooking classes over there. So I've always had that interest in cuisine. Alton Brown, who helped consult a little bit on the book, is a friend, has been for a number of years. He was my beta reader. In fact, I sent him a manuscript and he said, "I like the book, the knives suck." So I had to change the knives, apparently. But here it is, right there.
That one makes the.
Yeah, and as far as the other aspects of the show, I think we all kind of have a fascination of what's behind the curtain on reality TV. So beyond just sort of the spy part of it, aside from the cooking aspect of it, what is it like to be somebody who has to travel around the world 300 days a year with the same 5 people? And so that becomes a bit of it. And again, when I was on the Late Late Show, in addition to writing and operating the robot skeleton, I also did video segments in the field for Craig. And so like I would go to New York and do stuff. We shot in LA. We would do man on the street stuff, but I was conversant with that. So I thought, why not use that knowledge that I gained in the field, literally, by making it feel a lot more real in the book.
Sure.
There's a lot that can go wrong, and that's the fun part.
Yeah, live TV.
Yeah.
You never know. So let me ask you about your background in television as well, because you may or may not know, but Tom is also Emmy nominated, as a writer, as a producer, worked on many, many things that you actually will have heard of. The original Night Court, Parker Lewis Can't Lose, Nurse Jackie, Whoopi, Cosby, Grace Under Fire. So a lot of things that are very, very recognizable. So can you talk about what you have found that translates to writing story? Because in some ways, writing for the page versus writing for the screen are very, very different. And yet there are commonalities in pacing, story structure, character development. So what did you bring from that world into this world of books?
Another great question, because
Well, thank you.
it is writing. It is, and writing, whether you're doing comedy, I mean, you're obviously going to do different things and, have different techniques. But for me, it always begins and ends with character. You have characters that you care about. If you look at the great television shows, it's not just what the jokes are. It's really what the relationships are. Think of MASH, think of Cheers, think of Mary Tyler Moore Show, think of the Golden Girls. I mean, all of those great shows really began with characters and relationships, and that informs the comedy. It makes the jokes funny. The convention that I tried to follow is that I'll go for comedy, and it's the same in the book here, is that you want to have situations that the character, if properly drawn, could only do certain things a certain way in that moment. They're obligated to follow what they're all about. They could also only say what would be proper in that circumstance. And, sometimes it's tense, sometimes it's a joke to pull the rug, it's whistling through the graveyard, I'm scared, so I'll divert with a snarky line. So that to me is again a universal thing, no matter what you're writing. I think even in poetry, well, I don't write poetry, but
Not that we know.
not that you know of. As Richard Castle, Carl Sandburg, thank you. But I don't care what you're writing. You don't really have anything unless you can get the reader to invest, and you get the reader to invest by having the the whatever the work is populated by people you care about. And when in this particular book, that translates into when people get hurt, they really get hurt. When people fall in love, they really fall in love. When bad things happen, holy shit. And you feel that way because hopefully you've brought yourself to care about the emotions that these people are going through, not the, what caliber gun they're using or whatever. That's, I'll leave that to others. Pea shooters, that's all.
Sure, and you're gonna tell me when it's my turn to shut up, correct?
No, it's 6:35, so I was thinking around 6:40, we'll open it up to audience questions if you're ready.
Yeah.
I think the audience is really enjoying.
I don't want to talk to any of these people.
All right, out the window.
Yeah.
There's a little ladder rope.
That's great, that's great.
So I wanted to ask you too, so many of us think of writing as very solitary, and it is until it isn't. So I'm gonna ask you sort of a two-pronged question, because you already mentioned that with this book, you got to reunite with your editor from the Castle books, who is now your publisher.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you can talk about that relationship and how the collaboration makes for a better book. But then also, the importance of the writing community and the reading community at large is sort of a spiritual balm, that eases that solitary time.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. And, I see Bill Bertolo is here. He's a member of the community and one of the many people who I look around and I see that we hold ourselves up at gunpoint. No, we hold ourselves up when things get difficult. We're supportive of each other. I think especially in mysteries and thrillers to a certain degree, but especially in the mystery community, there is a sort of the rising tide that brings all the boats up, and we try to not compete but to collaborate in each other's success, and that's not just words. I mean, that is really why a lot of the mystery organizations in Connecticut and nationally are so strong. So that's a very important part of it. The solitary part of writing, I think, is also great. I think you need to have that contemplative time to sit and close the door and be alone and just make it work. But am I answering your question?
You are.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and can you tell us about reuniting with your editor?
Yes. Her name is Gretchen Young, and she was my editor at Hyperion, which was the Castle books, and that worked so well. Sometimes you meet people who, and not to do a pun here, but you're on the same page. And when you're on the same page with your editor, when they share your sensibility, they'll read your manuscript or you'll talk to them about what you're doing, and they may only give you 3 comments. I mean that quite literally. But if they're the right comments, they send you off thinking. And so you give 20 comments to yourself based on the 3 that you got. So we had a great relationship there. And so she had heard about my third person draft of The Accidental Joe and was very interested in it. So when she started Regalo Press, distributed by Simon & Schuster, she contacted me and said, hey, there was that book that was circulating, whatever happened to it? And I said to her, I'm rewriting it in the first person, direct address. I have 20,000 words to go before I complete that. And she said, can I have a peek at it when you finish? And I said, sure. And I gave it to her on a Friday, and on Monday she said, I want the book. So, and it's been great.
Terrific. So you said her name, Gretchen Young. Camera's recording. She also said if I could get you to say her name, that she would pay me. Very lucrative proposition. So I just have 2 more quick questions, and then we will open it up. But I wanted to ask you too. One of the things I found really fun in reading this book is there are names, from writers and friends in the writing community that I know that you go on pizza tours with some of these people and things like that. So I'm wondering if you can talk about a little bit of the insider, knowledge that is in this book. For instance, there's a Reed Farrell Coleman mentioned in this book, but a different kind of Farrell. And if you know the real Reed Farrell Coleman, you will laugh. So there's a lot of fun in this book.
I try to do a little bit of meta stuff. Reed had a a book come out last summer. And Sleepless City was what it was called. And it was a really hard-bitten crime novel in New York City. And he had a character appear just briefly in the book who was getting a Medal of Valor, and it was Sergeant Straw. And so I said, okay, the gauntlet is down. And so I thought I'll work his name into the Accidental Joe. And I spelled it, instead of feral, Farrel, I spelled it Feral. And there's a line in the book that Pike says to him when he finally meets him, he says, Feral, I thought it was Feral. He goes, no, it's Feral. I chose that as my code name because Condor was already taken. Anyways, he ended up being a very more important character in the book than I was in his. But it worked out well.
Well, he may have thrown the gauntlet, but I think you met the challenge. And so my final question for you, of course, I have to ask, you're like, this book is finally out in the world after all those many efforts, but we're all going to read it super quickly. I know that I did. So what can you tell us? What can you divulge about what we might expect next from you?
Well, a couple weeks ago, I finished the sequel entitled Hangry Globe. And that's the tentative title because who knows, I may decide to do some kind of Joe thing, you know what I mean? Like the Itchy Joe or something, the Scratchy Joe. But yes, and so that's the first draft of that, and I have much, 4 more drafts to do on it. That's what we do. But it's more of the same but different. It's like a James Taylor song.
Angry.
The Angry Joe.
Yeah, that's it.
Hey,
Oh.
all right. I'll get the wallet out. You can bookmark too, I think.
Thank you. I like that name.
That's a great name.
Yeah.
I was wondering why I saw you at the ATM earlier.
So should we open it up
Yeah.
to audience questions? Oh, right in the front.
I have a question. I mean, you so easily say, oh, I've got 4 more drafts to do of this, or, I wrote it in 3rd person and then I decided to write it in 1st person, and you make that sound easy, but I imagine that isn't so easy. So what is, you also mentioned that you ran and figured out the basis of the idea for this novel. So what is your process for how you write? Is it a moving meditation?
Not always. I mean, I had this great idea while I was running, and I didn't have a pen and pencil. Because my hands were full as a cocktail shaker. But I did struggle to remember that idea when I got back. But from there, it becomes basically, in a perfect world, what I try to do is you have an idea, there's a little tuning fork that says this might work, and you don't know till you get a few pages in, but reflect on character, reflect on what the world is, what they're going to do without having plot yet. And then start sketching. I like to plot, that's me from being in television where we had to turn in outlines and have everybody, give us their 2 cents before we ignored them. But I do a 20-page single-spaced outline for every book I do. However, when I'm writing it, about a third of the way through, I tend to just set that aside and it goes its own way. E.L. Doctorow had a great way of describing plotting, which worked for him, which is that you shouldn't really see further than your headlights. It's like driving at night. And I think that's really what it is. I do need to know kind of how it ends. Otherwise, I can't approach getting there. I do not nail down myself to rigidity over the outline. The outline is my guide. It's like a map, but I may decide to drive off the road.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
No.
Yes. I know, I shouldn't ask that question. So, Emily was asking you about the ideas that come to you when you're running. And I was thinking too, when you mentioned, you found some clarity in running. My first thought was, what or who are you running from?
Well, that's where I'm like Sebastian Pike. I'll give you the first line of the new book, which is that Sebastian Pike was born in the backseat of a getaway car. And so he's a guy who all his life is on the move. So this is the character stuff. I just want to know where this guy came from and why he's in motion. What is he running from? That's part of the book. And I notice I'm not pivoting from my own personal.
Other questions?
Bill.
Yeah, do you prefer to use a sharp knife or a cleaver?
I always go for a sharp knife. Yeah. Although poultry scissors when I'm doing a spatchcock. There's a word I didn't think I'd be able to say here. Either. Spatch.
I'd say now I owe you $5.
Yes, that's right.
I have a serious question. What do you think gave somebody the confidence that you could write the Castle books?
That's the Trigger episode, which was my very first book, sold to a very small house, reputable, but a very small publishing house called Carroll and Graff. And I had a wonderful publisher editor, Will Balliet. When my book, when he bought the Trigger episode and it came out, the publishing house got bought by a German company. And they didn't want any fiction. They wanted only the nonfiction catalog. And so there goes any chance of a sequel or anything like that. Will ended up leaving that place and he went to Hyperion. And he took me to lunch one day and he said, hey, there's a show on called Castle.
Okay, you paid, sorry.
Yes, that's right. But he said, the characters in that show are a lot like the characters you have in the Trigger episode. That relationship, and would you talk to us about doing this Castle book? So that led to sitting down with Gretchen Young, who was my editor, and so that was the entree to that. It was a great lesson, I think, in life, and that is that there was this high hope and then a dashed hopes, and you think, oh well, that sucks, and then it ends up next thing you know, you got 7 New York Times bestsellers. So you never know. That's not to say somebody else couldn't have done it. I'm just very fortunate that it was me riding that horse.
Or wielding the knife in this case.
Or wielding the knife.
More questions?
So what did Alton Brown object to about the knife?
Well, I have to mention a brand name, and I don't want to do that, but I chose what I thought was a high-end, well-known German brand name. Well, I don't know if it's German or not. It might be Austrian or Swiss, but he said, a real chef would not use that sort of pedestrian stuff. He'd have his own stuff, and so I actually ended up doing my own research into what are artisan knife makers in New York, and I found a great one, and it comes in handy in the book. That's all. That's a single.
The cover might be a little.
More questions? No. So I was going to say the T-word, but I'm the jumping. To thank our author for being with us. Tom. Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
He's the best.